You know, Angelo, we know that you were one of the participants in the High Desert Heart Institute study that had 35 initial participants. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that study. In fact, maybe let's even go back a little bit and tell us a little bit about your health condition that led you to seek out the help of Dr. Siva and the High Desert Heart Institute.
Well, ever since I come up here, I've had heart problems, primarily starting out with atrial fibrillation, and then ultimately I required a pacemaker to be put in. What happened is in December, actually December 20th to be specific, of 2008, I had a renal failure, congestive heart failure, and pacemaker failure concurrently. And it necessitated my being sent to the hospital. Paramedics came, and I went into the hospital, and they ultimately decided they were going to have to do surgery, and it was supposed to be very dangerous because because of my atrial fibrillation, I'd been taking blood thinner, so taking and doing surgery at that time was going to be very dangerous. They told my wife to make that decision for me because I wasn't able to do it at the time. I was really out. And she did. She thought, after listening to everything, the best thing for me to do is go ahead and try the surgery, which they did. And that went successful. The surgery was fine. After I got out of the hospital, for the next 5 to 6 weeks, I was in the hospital about 2 to 3 days minimum every week as a result of congestive heart failure. It basically was the real primary reason, is that nothing was happening. I had been taking all the medications possible. I was medically managed to the maximum extent, and finally I gave up. Quite honestly, I'd had enough. I got weak. I was on oxygen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I couldn't walk 15 feet without stopping. I couldn't even open up a bottle of water. My wife used to have to open the bottles of water for me. I was very concerned also with medical costs, and I was concerned that I didn't know what these bills were going to be because I hadn't received them yet, but I didn't want to empty the well out, so to speak, and I didn't want any good money spent after bad, if you will. So I decided to take myself out of the hospital. I asked them to remove all the IVs, and they told me that if I went home I would die. And I said, just give me the papers I need, and I'll go home. Because if I'm going to die, that's where I want to be anyway. Coincidentally, that was on a Sunday, and I had a pre-scheduled appointment with the Congestive Heart Failure Clinic on Monday. Well, my wife convinced me. Well, on Monday, I mentioned that I was going to go to the Congestive Heart Failure Clinic. I went there, and Dan Austin, who is the clinical director there, and Dr. Siva recommended that I go on a study of a product called L-Argenine, which is a dietary supplement. Well, I was just a little bit set back that they'd been doing everything they could. I felt, what are you going to do with a dietary supplement? And in all truthfulness, I didn't really think it was going to work, but they also told me they were going to do a tremendous amount of testing. Well, the testing really hit me because they said it was going to be free, and so I could see that the medical bills were not going to be rising, and so consequently I went ahead and said, let's do it, because I was more interested in seeing what was going to be happening to me, whether I had a week to live or 7 days or 2 days. I was expecting things to go down, and I wanted to have access to all of that information. So I did what they said, and I went on to L-Argenine, and there were 35 people total. And in a few short weeks, I began to actually feel better. I wasn't sure at that time whether I was feeling better or I was thinking I was feeling better. But actually I was feeling better. By the end of 3 months, I felt really pretty good. By the end of the 3rd month, I was doing things that I hadn't been able to do for years. My wife is the one who told me that she believed that I had more energy than I ever had in my life. And I really thought that maybe she should go on L-Argenine too, because I think she forgot our honeymoon, because I knew I had more energy then. And here I am ready to go on a second honeymoon because of the L-Argenine. And
tell us a little bit more about some of the other people you associated with in the study. How serious were these people who were involved in the study, and were they handpicked because of certain situations, or were they all pretty much in a similar situation as you were?
Well, they were handpicked, but they were handpicked on the basis of they picked the worst people. There were 33 that I know of out of the 35 that were what I'm going to refer to as, my term is nearly deads, okay, including me. And I got to meet the greater majority of them while we were there. And I could see that they were getting well in talking with them, because I actually spent about 4 to 5 hours at the clinic once or twice a week getting all these tests done. And we've had people who were at the clinic who had legs that they were told by their own doctor to have it amputated. They did not have it amputated because they didn't want to, but after taking this study, not for the leg but for the congestive heart failure, that leg has ended up looking great. It's good and doesn't require amputation. That's on one person. Another person was in there taking magnesium. They were there 3 times a week with getting IVs for magnesium because they couldn't get their magnesium level to the minimum required. They also had heart problems, but they were in there for this reason. The first thing they happened to notice was that the magnesium count was increasing. By the end of the 3 months, they were not using hardly any of the magnesium. The magnesium level had gotten back into the normal range, and the person was taking magnesium tablets as well as IV medication direct. And there's no magnesium in the product. That's the interesting thing.
So it obviously seems to be helping the absorption of the magnesium that people were getting otherwise.
Well, from my engineering background, I figure that what it's doing is making the body operate more efficiently, because magnesium is an element. It has to come from the food, and consequently the body is then taking and processing that and providing more magnesium to the body. Yes.
What was the attitude among the clinical participants as the weeks unfolded and they actually started feeling better, and like yourself, actually trying to grasp to a glimmer of hope that had not existed when you started the study?
Well, they were all really pleased. I mean, especially we had one gentleman that was there. He was taking nitroglycerin tablets, an average of about 16 per day for the angina, I think it's called. And at the end of the study, he was only taking 1. So, and he's still on it. I've not had an opportunity to talk to him since, but, you know, the angina pains went down substantially. I could just go on, but the attitude of the people was great. I mean, they were all feeling good. The interesting thing is at the end of 90 days, which was the length of the study, most of them went off of it. They kept 10 of us on. I happened to be one of the 10 who was one of the worst cases for an additional 90-day study with a reduced amount of the L-Arginine. And the other people who were on it, after several weeks, had to come back to the doctor because they weren't feeling very well, and they noticed that they believed it was because they needed something else, and the doctor told them, you really need to get back on your L-Arginine. So, but everybody felt good. It was great to go there and see the people being tested and feeling more positive about life. It was terrific.
Well, it's terrific to have you here.